There's no such thing as vacation in Toronto, that's for sure, and that's for certain over the last couple of weeks. Nick Alberga with you, presented by Botano. Of course, Jay Rosal not here. He's on vacation. He's actually in Nashville. So maybe we find out some stories between him and Luke Shen, his good buddy. But for now, I'm happy to be joined by Luke Fox of Sportsnet and Sportsnet.ca to break down the big news of the day for the second straight week. Of course, the Austin Matthews extension last week. It was the biggest rumored thing in this market for the last couple of weeks, Luke. Obviously, the last couple of months since Brad Treliving took over, but a 2-year extension for Sheldon Keefe. Your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I guess my initial thoughts are, we saw this coming. The fact that I think it was bigger news when he came out and endorsed him after Sheldon Keefe had been twisting in the wind for so long, after his number one supporter, really, in Kyle Dubas, got fired. And that was the guy who hired him to his last few jobs and was a big proponent of him, backed him after multiple playoff failures in the first round. And then once he got let go by the Leafs, I think there were a lot of question marks around Sheldon Keefe. Brad Treliving knew nothing about this guy except from just watching the team from afar and seeing the regular season success. But there was no prior relationship between the incoming GM and Sheldon Keefe himself. So I think the real tense moments for Sheldon in particular were those first few weeks when all of a sudden Kyle Dubas is gone. I'm sure Sheldon felt like the rug had been pulled from underneath him. And Treliving did a deep dive, talking to all the core players, talking to other staff members, trying to get a feel for Sheldon. He met with Sheldon intensely for 4 or 5 days, long hours, going over his philosophy, breaking down like his coverage, but also just getting a feel for the man himself. And then once he came out and endorsed him in Nashville saying, we're going to stick by this coach, I think that was the bigger news. This feels like a little bit more of a formality. It's a 2-year extension, takes some distraction away from training camp, which is going to open in less than a month here, and gives Keefe himself some financial security. He doesn't have to answer questions about it. But if things go off the rails, I don't think this means that Sheldon Keefe is immune to getting fired at some point. But it just kind of takes away the distraction, is an endorsement publicly of the man himself, and he can free his mind and focus on training camp, which, if you're a Leaf fan, I think is a positive.
Yeah, it is. And I do think that was my major takeaway as well. In the grand scheme of things, does it really mean much? Not really. It gives them a bit of security, but it takes away the lame duck status. You knew, I mean, you were a media member in this city. You cover this team on a daily basis. It was going to be a question on a daily basis. So I didn't really read too much into it. All I could think about today, especially when this is announced, is like if I were to tell you at the end of the season they lose in 5 games to Florida, it's Kyle Dubas who moves on and it's Sheldon Keefe who gets the extension. You would have called me crazy for sure, no?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like when that loss happened to the Florida Panthers, if you were to ask me that night in the heat of the moment what the odds were that Sheldon Keefe would be back, I'd put them at pretty long odds, just because I respect that he's a heck of a regular season coach. Following this guy, asking him questions, probably annoying him on a regular basis. I have tremendous respect for his work ethic. I think he's a really dedicated guy. I think he wants to do right. I think he's trying his hardest. And he's got some of the best regular season records out of this group in franchise history. I mean, he holds the franchise record for wins in a single season. The players have something to do with that too, but he's done well. But when push comes to shove in the postseason, he's won one series and lost five. And in a lot of those, most of them, he's held home ice advantage, last change. He's had the better team on paper and he hasn't gotten it done. And then, as great as the Tampa Bay victory was, I think for the whole organization and a big step, and he was on cloud nine after that win, to go out in 5 games to the Florida Panthers, not really ever feeling like they were in the series, getting behind early. I had a lot of questions about this guy. Slow starts, right? Were a common theme with the Maple Leafs. And when you start slow, some of the finger pointing, rightly so, goes to the coach. And I think it's a different kind of coaching in the playoffs when you're going head to head chess match against the other coach. And in a lot of those circumstances, he's been outcoached. Now, I get it from Brad Treliving's point of view. You don't want to maybe waste that bullet right out of the gate. And when he took over the Calgary Flames, he didn't do that. He held on to Bob Hartley. Bob Hartley ended up winning the Jack Adams his first year under Treliving. So it's not a bad play. I think it's a smart, safe, shrewd play by Treliving's standpoint. But like you mentioned, I don't think this necessarily means his security is taken care of. It's more his financial security is taken care of.
Definitely. And right away, I think of John Cooper, right? Like how many times did the Tampa Bay Lightning double down on John Cooper? Again, this is a bit different, but the fact that a new GM comes in, he could have easily said, hey, I'm a new GM. I want my guy, and the hell with Sheldon Keefe, but he didn't. He's doubling down. It leads me to believe everything you just mentioned. Like, not to draw lines and comparables to John Cooper, but like, I mean, you just mentioned it. Sheldon Keefe's been one of the best regular season coaches for X amount of years now, no?
He's been fantastic. So among the active NHL coaches with their respective teams, he has the third best points percentage behind Edmonton's Jay Woodcroft and Boston's Jim Montgomery, who's only been on the job for a year. So he's been phenomenal in the regular season. The Maple Leafs dips have not been as significant. You know, they rarely lost like 2-3 games in a row. Yeah, they had the odd stinker, and people like me probably made too much of it, but they quickly corrected course. And, you know, I actually think the regular season has a chance to be better this coming season because on paper, I think Tampa's taken a step back. The salary cap is finally caught up with them. Boston for sure has their issues. You know, they're not going to be as dangerous as they were last year. I mean, you lose your top two centers. That's a big blow. And I think the Atlantic's evening out, and the Maple Leafs, you know, yes, they lost some role players, but they're essentially bringing back all their key components. So they could well win the Atlantic. Keefe could well have another fantastic regular season. And it'll be the kind of the same old story with the coach and with the players. It's okay, let's see you go on a real run in springtime.
Well, that's the thing. I'm trying to quantify what would be a successful season outside of winning a Stanley Cup for Sheldon Keefe, right? Like this guy, his clock has been ticking for like 2 years now. And again, everything transpired in the springtime. I understand why they brought him back, but I ask you, like, I mean, how do you quantify what a successful season is for Sheldon Keefe? Because we just talked about it. He's unbelievable in the regular season. Can't get the job done when it matters most, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe you don't want to set the bar too high because there's other teams in the league and other powerhouses in the league.
Yeah.
For me, I think you got to win 2 rounds, and I think you got to be competitive in an Eastern Conference final. I mean, if you bow out to the Carolina Hurricanes, say, just to pick a team that looks pretty strong, I don't think there's shame in that. But I think there is shame if you go out the way you went out against the Florida Panthers. If you fall behind 0-3 and you had home ice advantage and you kind of, okay, yeah, you make one desperation win, it leaves fans with a sour taste in the mouth. Like I think about the average Leaf fan, they were on such a high after that Game 6 win in Tampa Bay. They felt like world beaters, finally monkey off the back, and it just kind of just sunk after that. You know, I think there wouldn't have been shame in losing to the Panthers. It's just the way it happens and getting kind of never really in the series. I think that's the tough look.
Oh, don't get me started, man. I still remember game 3. I'm in Vegas for a bit of a business trip, and I'm like, let me flick on the Leafs game. Got to watch this for work, and that was a downright shit show. Like, there's no other way to describe whatever the hell that was. And it was finished after that. And we all thought the Leafs are going to come out strong. They played pretty damn well in the first couple games. Didn't go their way. Then they came out that way in game 3. But ultimately, it is the blame game. I mean, you are close to these guys on a daily basis. And I, for one, am a bit shocked that the nucleus is staying the same, even with the new GM. But like, I mean, there's only so many fingers you can point around that room now, whether it be the GM or the coach. Like, if last year wasn't on the players, this one certainly is.
Well, it's starting to feel that way, right? But you know, this is the 8th year with this core.
Crazy.
You know, Riley, Nylander, Marner, Matthews, Tavares hasn't been there for all 8 of them, but at some point, you know, there's a case to be made for stability, but there's also a case to be made for holding guys accountable and feeling like don't get too comfortable. And outside of the GM, who Brendan Shanahan planned to bring back until the negotiation went sideways, and that's a whole separate conversation.
Yeah.
But outside of that, really, they're running it back, right? Same head coach. Yeah, some new faces in terms of assistant head coaches and on the fringes of the lineup, but the same core. William Nylander is the only question mark at this point, and Brad Treliving says that he's going to keep grinding away, wants to get him signed, preaching the same old thing about you don't want to lose talent, keep knocking at the door, and eventually you bang it down. I just wonder, how much longer we can go on like this before the mix changes. So I think the main thing for the Leafs is how do the new types of players they bring in, Ryan Reeves, Tyler Bertuzzi, that sort of added sandpaper, grit, snot is the word Treliving has used. How does that change the complexion of the team? Because really the nucleus is exactly the same.
I am so curious to see, because the laundry list of Octobers, the last 4 or 5 years, the way this team comes out. I still have a bitter, bitter taste in my mouth over that October. My coach Jay Rosehill was on me. Why are you getting so pissed off? I'm like, just wait till the Stanley Cup playoffs. You're going to see those type of games, and that's exactly what we saw, specifically against the Florida Panthers. I just wonder about the leash. Like, if they don't get off to a good start, what kind of leash do you think Sheldon Keefe has, even with this extension in hand?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's less of one. This organization has shown that they will happily throw money at a problem. Mike Babcock just finished collecting checks from MLSE at the end of June, and found a job with the Columbus Blue Jackets. But the Leafs were paying him until the end of June, and that feels like a lifetime ago that he was fired and Keefe took over. So I think that's the first, easy reference you make when it comes to Sheldon Keefe's leash. You know, are they going to, if they have a disastrous first couple months and fall right out of the playoff picture, I do think all bets are off. Looking around the conference, around the division, I think that's very unlikely. I feel like a strong regular season is probably in the cards, even though I'm not completely sold on the mix they have on the blue line, their center depth. I'm not thrilled about. You can nitpick like that, but they should be a good regular season team, and I think it'll be decision time again based on spring. And it's kind of, you feel like a broken record saying that all that matters to this team is the playoffs, but you can't kind of skirt around it. It is the truth.
And Rosie always laughs because it was Rosie's first season last year as like sort of a media member doing this show, and I'd always bring it up. I'm like, dude, I could not care less about these games. It's all about the Stanley Cup playoffs. We got there, and I'm like, welcome to covering the Toronto Maple Leafs. But I think on so many notes, it's fascinating. I just want to leave with asking you about the media availability today. It just seems like a different tone, taking nothing away from Kyle Dubas. I'm sure he's going to do some great things with the Pittsburgh Penguins. It just seems like a different tone with Brad Treliving in town. What's it been like to cover him? What was the media avail like today?
Yeah, I'm a fan. I do I love every single movie he's made so far? No, but I think he's done a lot of work. I think he did some nice work. I know fans probably wish Austin Matthews signed for longer than 4 years, but to get that wrapped up so quickly, to state from the outset, the day he was hired, he said, "This is my priority number one," and he got Austin Matthews signed well over a month before camp opened. I mean, that's a win. You don't want that lingering. You sold a guy that you didn't really know on committing to the Maple Leafs. And if you're going to build a cup contender, you need a pure number one center. You need a goal scorer. He got that done. I think that's a big feather in his cap. And then just like on a personal level, I find him very accessible via text message or when I reach out to him. He always responds. I find that in his availabilities, he's very personable. Is he going to give away state secrets when the Zoom camera's rolling? No, and no one expects him to. But I like the tone that he's struck, and I like the fact that in a summer where a lot of GMs take time off and hit the dock or whatever, pick up a fishing rod. This guy, it feels like every week or every other week, he has a new signing to make, even small things like picking up Martin Jones, picking up Simone Benoit, like just adding depth pieces deep into August. You can tell that he's always working and he's trying to make this into a better team. I think ultimately we've yet to see his big move. I think the Nylander thing is going to be fascinating. I think a lot of people will judge him based on what goes on there. but I would give him an A grade so far.
Yeah, very strong reputation at that. And I just wanted to wrap by getting you to pump your work. You put out an article today regarding this obviously big time news and Sheldon Keefe and the extension. So what have you been up to?
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to take some time off, trying
Out
to
here.
hit the golf course, but the Leafs keep signing guys or hiring assistant coaches. So, yeah, you can check my workout at sportsnet.ca. I'll be covering the team all year and doing a bit of league wide stuff as well. So I appreciate anyone who takes the time to read, because it's much easier to watch videos like yours.
Oh, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you, Luke. Thanks so much for this.
All right, thanks, Nick.
There you have it. That's Luke Fox of Sportsnet.ca. Again, Sheldon Keefe, a 2-year extension with the Toronto Maple Leafs at the Leafs Nation 401, where you can subscribe to our YouTube page. I'm Nick Alberga, and we'll talk soon. Take care.